We're back again in the most familiar garage of this channel. This guy's garage. And this time it's not a Mazda and it's not a Nissan. It's the Honda. And what we're doing is a lot. We're going to be doing front control arms with tie rods. We're going to be doing wheel bearing. We're going to be doing front sway bar with adjustable end links. Did I say inner and outer tie rods?
No.
And the ball joints for the control arm. Those are going to be the fronts. And then in the rear, we have full adjustable arms coming in. They're on order, just waiting for them to come in. We're going to be doing those as well. And then the car should be ready to go, hopefully. Oh, no, I lied. And then after all that, then we're doing the timing chain, the serpentine stuff, and valve adjustment. So it's got a lot of work. We're hoping the front end goes pretty quick. And then the rear should be pretty decent. Those arms are pretty easy to get to and do. Really, the biggest problem that I think we're going to have is going to be the wheel bearing. That probably, we do have some tools for that stuff. We just picked these up. So hopefully everything goes smooth. First things first, we make sure we jack up the car properly and remove the wheel. I always use this protected lug nut socket to help prevent from damaging my wheels. I have damaged them in the past and I will show that in a different video. Once the wheel was removed, I focused on removing the axle nut, which luckily on this side was pretty easy. Just had to use an impact to get it off. Then we focused on removing the rest of the components for the suspension. In this case, I removed the brake hose bracket bolt that was holding it against the knuckle. Of course, remove the caliper bolts as well. Make sure to use some kind of hanger to help hang the caliper on the frame or some part of the body, so that way it's not hanging off the line, so we can prevent any kind of damage, and so that way it's out of the way as well. Then we removed the cotter pin for the tie rod along with loosening the bolt, but we did keep the bolt on there to help us stabilize the knuckle, so that way when we pull off the hub we have something holding the knuckle together and not just letting it move around. Also, while under there working on the tie rod, I made sure to loosen the nut that tightens the outer tie rod to the inner, so that way later on we can easily take it fully off. Next step we focused on was to remove the hub from the knuckle, and doing this we used a slide hammer that we had access to thanks to my buddy. Before loosening the hub, we wanted to make sure we didn't damage the speed sensor, and while trying to take out that speed sensor, we came to realize that it was just simply not going to come off until we fully removed the knuckle from the car and basically forced it out by drilling it or whatever other methods to get it removed. Once we realized that, we then go ahead and moved on to removing the hub with the slide hammer. And honestly, I thought this was going to be one of the harder parts of the job, but all it took was a few slides and it came right off. After that, we started focusing on removing the nut on the lower ball joint that's attached to the lower control arm from the knuckle. Obviously removing the cotter pin and then focusing on removing the bolt. Now, unlike the tie rod nut where we wanted to keep it attached for a little while to make sure the knuckle stayed in place, this one now we can fully remove. Originally we thought we were going to keep it on, trying to knock the ball joint out of the control arm, but it's just stuck in there where it was not going to easily come out. And we tried a few methods, of course, with a hammer and then an air hammer with a fork, and neither one worked. It just was not coming off while it was sitting inside the car. Once we removed the nut from the ball joint on the knuckle that was attached to the control arm, we focused on the bolt that was attached to the knuckle that holds the knuckle to the actual coilover. Now, this particular nut wasn't coming out too easily, so we first had to break it loose with a long ratchet, and then we could use the impact to remove it further. After that was completed, we forced the knuckle down and moved the axle to the side a little bit along with the caliper so we can access the bolts that are attached to the subframe for the control arm. As for the bolts that are connecting the control arm to the subframe, those were overall fairly easily accessible. We were able to access them with an impact using some deep sockets along with some extensions and swivel sockets as well. There was one bolt to access with the impact that we had to use a pry bar to push down on the sway bar so we can access it easier to get it out. Now, if we really wanted to, we could access the bolt from the bottom using a ratchet manually, but we chose to go this route. Now, there are 3 more bolts that are underneath the control arm connecting it to the subframe. These 3, luckily on this side, were fairly easy to get out with an impact. They were a little stubborn, but we were able to get them out. As you'll see later, the other side was a different story. And finally, after all that, we were able to get out the control arm with the knuckle out of the car. Now it was time to start pressing everything out and replacing parts. Now that everything was out of the car, we went back and focused on the bowl joint to remove it from the control arm, and then so we can press it out of the knuckle. And overall, it wasn't actually too bad to get it out. All we had to do was just give it a few hits with a good size hammer, and it came out pretty easily. But on the car, just didn't want to do it. Remove the ring for the back of the knuckle that was hiding the sensor and the wheel bearing. That was overall fairly easy. We just used a very long screwdriver, gave it a few taps, and forced it upwards to make it pop out. Then we focused on removing the speed sensor, and the only way to get it out was to completely destroy it. It was just completely seized in that hole. It was not going to come out any other way, so we did have to actually replace the sensors as well with new ones. This is just one example of when people tell me that OE did it right, the manufacturer did it right. This is a perfect example that they did not. They just did it right enough. That's what I always say. You'll see later on that I say something similar, and I completely stand by those words. Here you can see that I'm pulling on it with quite a bit of force, still not coming out. My buddy still has to fully just continue to destroy this thing to get it finally to come out. We end up after using a chisel or a punch to completely destroy the front of it, we then put in a smaller screwdriver to finally force it out. Finally, we get one step closer to removing the wheel bearing, and that's by removing the snap ring that holds it in place, or that helps hold it in place. To remove the snap ring, we did a few things. We made sure we knocked some rust off with a wire wheel and also used some WD-40 to help lube it up. We did try also picking at it with some picks and small screwdrivers to help break more debris off of that. And then we started using snap ring pliers and a screwdriver to help basically get it out of its hole. The snap ring pliers just couldn't do it on their own. They just could not hold on to the snap ring good enough to help get it out. So with the force of a few screwdrivers, we were finally able to actually get that out of there.
Open up the tools. Let's see. The lady at the checkout is pretty certain this is going to break on us.
Oh yeah, so is that what she said?
That's how I understood it when she was talking, trying to sell us that warranty.
Did you buy the warranty?
I did. I bought the 2-year because I don't think Maddox has a.
Well,
I don't know if they have a
lifetime
or even a year. Yeah, I don't think they have any kind of warranty. She couldn't tell me if they had it. I mean, it looks like a nice kit.
Move up the bolt.
What do you think? You think it looks like a nice kit?
Yeah.
It looks nice.
We'll see.
I mean, we'll find out.
Before pressing out the bearing, we of course made sure we found the right adapters that fit on top, and also cleaned around where the bearing was going to come out, just to make it as easy as possible on us, and to make sure all the plates and adapters fit properly there, so there was nothing in the way causing any kind of issue. We also did grease up the bolt that you're going to use to press this out with this tool. We used an adjustable wrench to hold the nut on there. We didn't have any specific wrenches that could do it, so we had to use an adjustable, and then on the other end we just used an impact to rotate the bolt. We tried using the battery operated one, but it just wasn't enough, so we went with a big plug-in electrical impact. Now that has significantly a lot more force, but that also was not doing it, so we had to throw in heat at the bearing and then run the wired impact, and finally it was able to come out.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Before pressing out the ball joint, I just go ahead and used a wire brush wheel to go ahead and clean up that hole and clean a little bit around the knuckle, since we will be painting this. Now of course I did a lot more cleaning after this once the ball joint was removed, but I started doing it now just because I was already there.
What did you have to say about this kit?
It's the biggest C-clamp I've seen.
It's a pretty fucking good kit,
Looks
I have to say.
It's very, very nice.
Icon 16 piece. Yep, the mesh set. This guy really likes the C-clamp, and he's right. This is a beefy C-clamp. That thing is beefy. And time to undo this one. Hopefully, not as bad as the bearing.
Since this was the first time for us using a kit like this, it took us a minute to get accustomed to what adapters we're going to have to use with the C-clamp, but once we got it fully set, it was not too bad. Obviously with kits like this, you want to make sure everything is sitting properly on the ball joint and also the knuckles, so you can properly push it out. And then once that was done, we just used the battery operated impact, which was able to just push out the ball joint, not easily, but easy enough. And of course, as already mentioned, after we removed the ball joint, I started cleaning up some more, just to make sure everything was ready for the new installation of parts and to go back on the vehicle. As for painting the parts, I used POR 15 on all the components, and of course anti-seize for anything else that the paint was going to be on. As for parts used, only a few items were Honda Genuine, which was basically the snap ring and the ring that sits on the back of the bearing that covers the sensor. Everything else was basically third-party OE-style components. I mainly utilized Dorman just because I've had good luck with them and they have a pretty good reputation now. Now, as already mentioned, I definitely used anti-seize on anything I could when putting things back on. As for the ball joint, we put anti-seize on the ball joint or the hole, depending on how we decided to do it at that time. I think we did it differently on both sides, but regardless, there was anti-seize there. Same thing for the ball joint, same thing for the wheel bearing and the hub. And of course, as for the installation of parts, it's just a reversal of the uninstall. We wanted to make sure that the adapters we use fit properly on the ball joint so it didn't destroy the ball joint. Of course, the one that goes by the tip of the ball joint, or where the nut would go, or the shaft, whatever you want to call it, that's where we're going to have a more bigger opening adapter, so that way it can just fit over it easily. And then on the back of the ball joint, where the metal flat part is, we wanted to make sure that the outer rim was where the adapter was sitting, so we could probably push it in. Now, as you can see here, I started cleaning the hole for the sensor with a file, and funny enough, we thought this was going to be enough, but it wasn't. You will see later that we actually did have to deal with this while it was on the car, and what we had to do to try to help fix it so we can fit the new sensor in.
So the way you know which side goes towards the back and which side faces the hub is these are magnetic on one side, not by a lot, but enough for the wheel speed sensor to detect. So basically you get a piece of metal and you touch the edge, and on this side, as you can see, there's just the tiniest amount of magnetic force pulling that metal down, where on this side, there's nothing. Just super easy. It's hard to tell on camera, but also another way, if you want to use this video as reference, if you have these kind of wheel bearings, this flatter seal, bushing, whatever, instead of the grooved or recessed one, goes on the back. So this will be, if you're looking at the car, it'll sit like this. So that goes towards the back, towards the axle, and the hub is going to be over here.
Going back to what I said earlier, I anti-seized anything I could possibly do, and that is, in this case, of course, we did the wheel bearing. This will hopefully help prevent, obviously, any kind of seizing that might happen if we have to do the wheel bearing again. Hopefully not, though. Putting it back was pretty simple. Obviously, again, finding the correct adapters, which were basically the same ones we used to take off the old one. We made sure we used grease again on the threads of the bolt, along with where the washers were going to sit on the adapters, this way to help with any kind of heat that this was going to experience from any of the pressure that's going to happen while pressing in. And then of course we wanted to make sure that the wheel bearing was sitting as straight as possible in this hole before we started pressing in. We did not want to try to force this in while it was unaligned. That way we would have to get a whole new wheel bearing and potentially deal with something that's extremely stuck to try to get out and fix what we caused. And once we were sure it was aligned, we just used the impact once again while holding the nut with the adjustable wrench, and it went in pretty smooth. After that, we installed the snap ring, which was a little anxiety inducing, mainly because I was worried that it was gonna snap right at our face. But overall, went in with no issues, and then we went on to the hub. Yep, that's right, you guessed it, anti-seize again. And then of course we used the same wheel bearing kit to help install the new hub, which went very smooth and very easy. Honestly, these two kits from Harbor Freight, no sponsorship, but that helped us. I thought for sure we were going to have to go to a shop to press all this out, and we were able to do it all in the garage. Definitely worth the investment. As for the installation, we just made sure the back plate that sat on the back of the wheel bearing was sitting on top of the metal part of the wheel bearing and not the actual seal. And then of course on the front we just used an adapter that was big enough to fit in the circle where the nut would sit for the wheel hub. And for impacting it in, we just simply kept going until we could hear an audible sound that it basically has reached the end. We also did rotate the hub to make sure there was no binding and it wasn't touching anything for it to be too tight. After that, we installed the round ring that sat on the back. I forgot the name that is used by Honda for this. Overall, pretty simple. We just use an adapter from the wheel bearing kit to lay it flat on top of it and then just hit it with a hammer to get it to get in there flush. Now, before installing everything onto the car, I also made sure that I cleaned up the subframe with a wire wheel as much as I possibly could. It was kind of hard to get to some of those places with the wire wheel, but I got in there enough to where I could wire brush it, clean it down with some acetone, and then use more POR to clean that up. Of course, I let all this dry before I installed the parts back on. And of course, since I was going to go ahead and clean the subframe up and paint it, I also was going to clean up these bolts that were rusted up, and I did use anti-seize. Now, I know there are people going to be out there that are going to be like, you shouldn't be using anti-seize on bolts that are for suspension components, but honestly, these were on there so tight, I highly doubt this anti-seize is going to make them get loose while driving, and if they do, I'll deal with that at that time, but I don't believe it's going to happen. And as you can imagine, because everything was cleaned up with all the bolts and the anti-seize, everything was going in very easily by hand mostly. As I mentioned earlier, as you can see, installing the bolts for the control arm into the subframe was easier to use a ratcheting wrench than it was to try to use the impact, although we did still use the impact for a lot of things. For this, it was quite easy to do it by hand from the bottom. We started with installing the lower control arm first, and then once those bolts were tightened up, we then installed the knuckle with all the components that were attached to it. I will say it is nice to have a second set of hands, because it was nice to have somebody to be able to adjust the control arm while you were putting in the bolts in the proper position, so that way the bolts could go in easily, and same thing for the knuckle and so on. So if you have a friend that can help out, that is the most ideal. After putting the knuckle back on the control arm, we put the axle through the hub. We anti-seized the hole the coilover is going to go in, and then we slid the knuckle up to the coilover. We use a floor jack to help hold the knuckle up to the coilover while I got the bolt ready to be installed, and then tighten it down. I also did anti-seize the ball joint threads and anything else I could remember to do. I know I missed a few things, but I try to do as much as I can to help avoid this in the future. After making sure that the nut was properly tightened, we did use a new cotter pin. We used an impact to tighten up the axle nut. We didn't have a torque wrench to do the insane amount of torque that this requires. We just relied on the impact. And then, of course, we used a punch to divot in the nut so that way it doesn't loosen up on its own. Now, this is where I mentioned earlier where we had to come back to the speed sensor hole. We thought we were good. We put some anti-seize on and it didn't want to go in. So we actually had to do is drill the hole, and we actually had to do it on the other side as well. On the other side, though, we did it outside the car, of course. But once the hole was properly drilled out, the sensor fit in exactly how it should. Again, this goes back to how absurd this is and should not be happening. But here we are. This is a component that's supposed to be removable without having to take off the entire knuckle. After that was done, we focused on replacing the inner and outer tie rod. Luckily, my friend had a inner tie rod tool. It's a specialty tool that you do have to get to remove it. Is there other ways of being able to remove it? Possibly, but this definitely is a lot more helpful. Once we use the correct die to use the tool with to remove the inner tie rod, we of course put in the new one, and we also added some thread locker, the medium thread locker, to help prevent it from loosening up. We did also replace the dust boot with a new one. It was hard for me to capture us putting on the clamp for the dust boot that goes on the rack. All I can say is that we used a very big screwdriver along with that with pliers, and it was still annoying to do. For the smaller part of the dust boot that's closer to the outer tie rod, we just used the zip tie. Once that was installed, we go ahead and put on the tightening nut for the outer tie rod and install the outer tie rod. I did count how many turns it took to remove the stock one from the stock inner tie rod, and it was 16 turns, so we did that just to kind of match it up. Of course, after all this is done, we are going to get an alignment. And of course, finally attach the outer tie rod to the knuckle with the supplied bolt that came with the new tie rod and the cotter pin. And now we're going to repeat this process on the other side.
Yeah, but if I get the axle hot, I should do the same thing. Hold it. I mean, look, like there's nothing. Jesus. Comes with everything you need for most of these jobs. If you want me to answer you in a serious manner, that's the answer. you have a toolkit, just a cheapo toolkit, usually it'll come with everything you need. Stinking heat. It's funny because the Prius is a bolt-on, but it still needed this. Oh yeah, one more. There it is. Jesus. Well, at least nobody was staying behind you. These are working. These are good. That's it. That's fine. Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, it's a little dirty. So it doesn't fly up and hit anybody anywhere.
Fine.
You're getting close. There it is.
But that wasn't the ring I was talking about.
I know. Oh yeah, buddy. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Kind of. Not really now. Like the first few times it looked like it wanted to. Shit. No, it feels like it is. Oh, okay. Ugh. I'm holding it. Okay, that one's up.
So we just gotta.
I'm worried this is going to fuck something up.
We gotta still. Don't worry.
No?
Why are you so worried?
You know,
How gentle that was. Why are you so worried?
it's scary, Art. Mine is just a little Wow. That's crazy. There it is. Jesus.
Oh, that works. That was easy. Why don't we do that in the first place?
Why didn't we? Fucking around too much.
Hey, I got a question for you. Where's the ball joint?
Huh?
We popped the ball joint.
We did?
out of
Oh,
the
we
nut
did.
hole.
Wow, dude. We don't even have to press it out. The bitch just came out. That's fantastic.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
Listen, I don't know why it didn't do it on the other side. That's all I'm saying.
But
No, it's just because the pressure. No, it's just because the pressure. This bitch is on there.
okay. That's just, I've never, ever seen that happen.
That's wild. Came
That is
right
wild.
off.
That just popped right out of the
Right off. Wow.
Now look at it, I was like, wait, there's a hole there. There should be a ball joint in there.
That tells you how stuck it was. Crazy. Also, this shows you how good gloves are because this is hot, but I can hold it. But I can feel through the gloves that there's heat on this. If I was touching this barehanded,
It went
Yeah.
through the bolt to the thing. And
that's wild. I cannot believe that popped out. I mean, it makes our life way easier, but holy shit.
like I said, I've never had that happen, ever.
That popped out on its own. Dude, that was so. Why did I do that? Why did you tell me about this in the first one? Now you know. What size is it? What size is it? 316? fact that that just snapped in and didn't come on our face is fantastic. When I did the coilovers, I think it was the coilovers.
Okay.
I had a comment.
Okay.
Oh, all that heat, Anthony! You wanted the heat. I know you like the heat, you pyromaniac. Oh, folks. Oh, folks. No, not so close.
No.
That's a big one.
Gonna do it.
There you go.
Did it.
Broke that off. Yep. There it is. No, you gotta twist it a little bit.
That's good.
No, it's not on it. On this side, it's not. There you go. Now push it in. Now lock it.
Yeah.
There you go.
I don't know why it was like a little weird.
There you go.
It's harder when you're on the ground.
Yep. Wow. There you go. Model number for the driver's side for, I think I also went for a Dorman. It doesn't say on the packaging, very plain packaging. But I believe this is also Dorman. The inner and outers are Dorman. But, which way does the washer go?
The point's gotta go in.
Or it's got to go into the steering.
And there's notches. They fit into. So once I get it close, then I'll line up the notches.
Just clears. Clamps over. question is, how hard is that going to be to tighten up?
Oh, yeah, tighten up.
I like it. It's working. I like that it's painted. That's nice. Because I don't think... I guess it was.
Not painted very well.
But it's... Oh, yeah, man. Okay. That's pretty good.
And that's it for this video. All the front suspension stuff has been done. However, in the next video, we're going to be working on the front calipers. We're going to be redoing the seals on them because mine, well, they have holes in them. So we'll see you in the next one.